The promise of later life is often obscured by a prevailing fear of decline, where the accumulation of years is mistakenly equated with the inevitable erosion of the mind. A common narrative suggests that memory and clarity must fade as the physical body ages, trapping many in a state of anxiety about their own cognitive future. This widespread belief ignores the potential for the mind to actually sharpen and expand when cultivated with specific, disciplined intention. The teachings of Heng offer a contrasting perspective, proposing that mental clarity is not a matter of luck, but the result of removing internal friction and mastering the self. By shifting focus from preserving youth to cultivating a harmonious internal environment, it becomes possible to navigate aging with a profound sense of purpose and stability. The journey ahead charts a course through the principles of mental self-mastery, aiming to transform the aging process into a period of peak wisdom and cognitive vitality. Establishing the foundation of mental stillness, the modern mind is frequently compared to a turbulent body of water, where the sediment of daily stress and sensory overload obscures the clarity at the bottom. Heng emphasizes that a cloudy mind cannot perceive reality accurately, nor can it retain information effectively when it is in a constant state of agitation. The first step toward a calmer brain involves the deliberate reduction of external noise and the cessation of multitasking, which fractures attention and depletes neural resources. When an individual constantly shifts focus between disparate tasks, the brain is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, hormones that actively inhibit the consolidation of memory. By choosing to do one thing at a time with total presence, the neural pathways associated with focus are strengthened rather than fragmented. This practice of singular attention acts as a filter, preventing the unnecessary accumulation of mental debris that leads to cognitive fatigue. The biological mechanism behind this stillness lies in the relationship between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. When a mind is still, the prefrontal cortex maintains executive control, allowing for rational decision-making and efficient memory retrieval. However, chronic restlessness shifts activity to the amygdala, the brain's fear center, which prioritizes survival reactions over higher-order thinking. A person who lives in a state of perpetual rush essentially trains their brain to remain in survival mode, which is metabolically expensive and damaging to long-term brain health. Cultivating stillness allows the nervous system to shift into a parasympathetic state, where repair and regeneration of brain cells can occur. It is in this state of rest that the brain clears out the metabolic waste products that accumulate during waking hours, a process crucial for preventing neurodegenerative conditions. Consider the scenario of a person attempting to read a complex book while simultaneously monitoring news alerts and planning dinner. In this fragmented state, the eyes may scan the words, but the meaning fails to penetrate the deeper layers of memory because the brain is busy managing the anxiety of the unread alerts. Contrast this with the individual who sets aside all devices, sits in a quiet corner, and dedicates 30 minutes solely to reading. This person not only comprehends the material more deeply, but also finishes the session feeling refreshed rather than drained. The practice of removing distractions is not merely about productivity. It is an act of preserving the mental energy required for longevity. However, the pursuit of stillness often encounters the barrier of internal resistance, known in Shaolin philosophy as the hindrance of restlessness or the monkey mind. A common misconception is that one can simply will the mind to be quiet, but suppression often leads to greater agitation. The approach is not to force silence, but to observe the noise without becoming attached to it, allowing thoughts to settle like dust in a room that is no longer being swept. This requires a gentle persistence, understanding that the brain has likely been conditioned for years to seek stimulation. It is natural for the mind to rebel initially when deprived of its usual diet of constant input. The cultivation of this mental foundation also requires a reevaluation of what is considered essential information. In an age of information overload, The brain is often tasked with holding on to trivial data that serves no purpose other than to occupy space. Heng Yi's perspective suggests that wisdom lies in knowing what to ignore, freeing up cognitive capacity for what truly matters. By consciously selecting which information to engage with, the individual protects their mental bandwidth from being exhausted by irrelevance. This selective attention is a form of mental hygiene, as critical to brain health as physical hygiene is to the body. Furthermore, the environment in which one lives plays a significant role in supporting or hindering this mental stillness. A cluttered physical space often mirrors and exacerbates a cluttered mind, creating a feedback loop of visual noise that demands subconscious processing power. Simplifying one's surroundings can have an immediate, tangible effect on mental clarity, signaling to the brain that there are fewer threats or tasks to monitor. This external order supports internal order, making the practice of stillness more accessible. It is helpful to view the environment not as a neutral backdrop, but as an active participant in one's mental state. Finally, the practice of stillness is the bedrock upon which all other mental keys rest. Without the ability to calm the internal waters, any attempt to improve memory or cognition is akin to building a structure on shifting sand. It is the discipline of stopping, breathing, and centering that allows the brain to access its full potential. The transition to a clearer mind begins not with adding new techniques, but with the courageous act of stripping away the unnecessary. What noise must I silence to hear my own thoughts? Unifying the physical vessel with cognitive flow, the separation of mind and body, is a modern illusion that contradicts the holistic approach of Shaolin heritage, which views the physical form as the vessel for the spirit and intellect. Heng Yi often points out that a stagnant body leads inevitably to a stagnant mind, as the flow of energy, or qi, is required to nourish the brain. From a physiological standpoint, movement is the primary pump that drives oxygen-rich blood and nutrients to the brain tissue, stimulating the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. This protein is essential for the growth of new neurons and the preservation of existing synaptic connections. An individual who neglects the body in favor of purely intellectual pursuits often finds that their mental sharpness dulls over time, as the physiological infrastructure supporting the brain begins to atrophy. There is a profound connection between balance in the body and stability in the mind. Practices such as Tai Chi or Qigong utilize slow, deliberate movements that require intense concentration and coordination, effectively training the brain to map the body in space. This proprioceptive demand activates neural networks that are often dormant in a sedentary lifestyle, keeping the brain plastic and adaptable. When a person performs a complex movement sequence, they're not just exercising muscles. They're exercising the neural circuitry that controls planning, execution, and feedback. This integration of movement and awareness acts as a powerful countermeasure against the cognitive rigidity that often accompanies aging. Consider the difference between a morning routine that begins with passive consumption of television versus one that starts with 20 minutes of mindful stretching or walking. The person who moves immediately signals to their body and brain that the day requires alertness and engagement. This physical activation clears the mental fog of sleep more effectively than caffeine, establishing a rhythm of vitality that persists throughout the day. In contrast, remaining sedentary signals the body to conserve energy, leading to a sluggish metabolism and a brain that operates at a lower gear. However, a limitation often arises when individuals believe that exercise must be intense or painful to be effective, leading to discouragement or injury. The wisdom here lies in consistency and flow rather than intensity. The goal is to keep the energy moving, not to exhaust the reserves. It is important to recognize that the body changes with age, and the type of movement must evolve to respect these changes while maintaining the principle of activity. Pushing the body beyond its capacity out of ego violates the principle of harmony and can lead to setbacks that enforce inactivity. At the midpoint of this exploration, it becomes clear that the mind cannot be treated as a separate entity floating in a jar. The practical insight derived from Heng Yi's stance is that physical discipline is mental discipline. The ability to command the body to move when it wants to rest is the same muscle used to command the focus when a mind wants to wander. By integrating the body into the cognitive preservation strategy, the individual gains a powerful ally. The body becomes an anchor for the mind, a place to return to when thoughts become scattered or anxious. The circulation of energy through the body also plays a critical role in flushing out metabolic waste products that can lead to brain fog. Just as a river must flow to remain clear, the fluids of the body must circulate to maintain health. Stagnation is the enemy of vitality, creating pools of toxicity where disease and degeneration can take root. Regular, gentle movement ensures that this internal river flows freely, carrying nutrients to the brain and removing the byproducts of cellular activity. The concept of structure in Shaolin training refers not only to the physical posture, but to the alignment of intention and action. When the body is aligned, the breath flows deeply, and when the breath is deep, the nervous system remains calm. This creates a feedback loop where physical posture directly influences emotional state and cognitive readiness. A person slumping in a chair with shallow breathing will find it difficult to maintain a positive, sharp mental state. Correcting the posture often corrects the mood. Ultimately, the unification of body and mind transforms the aging process from a passive decline into an active cultivation of life force. It shifts the narrative from "my body is failing me" to "I am tending to my vessel." This perspective empowers the individual to take ownership of their daily vitality, recognizing that every step taken is a deposit into the bank of cognitive longevity. The brain thrives not in isolation, but as the command center of a vibrant, moving system. How does my physical stillness contribute to my mental stagnation? Releasing emotional weight to free memory capacity. Memory is not infinite, and the capacity to retain new information is often hampered by the sheer volume of emotional baggage carried from the past. Heng Yi speaks of the hindrance of ill will and the heavy burden of holding on to grudges, regrets, or past narratives that no longer serve purpose. From a neurological perspective, holding on to negative emotions recruits the same brain regions involved in processing immediate physical pain, consuming vast amounts of glucose and metabolic energy. When the brain is preoccupied with replaying old conflicts or nursing ancient wounds, it has little energy left for encoding new memories or processing the beauty of the present moment. Letting go is therefore not just a spiritual practice, but a cognitive necessity for freeing up processing power. The mechanism of repression versus release is critical here. Repressing emotions requires active, continuous neural inhibition, which is exhausting for the prefrontal cortex. This chronic cognitive load creates a background hum of stress that interferes with the formation of short-term memories. A person who is subconsciously fighting a battle with the past will often find themselves forgetting keys, names, or appointments, not because their memory is broken, but because their attention is held hostage by unresolved emotion. Release, or letting go, deactivates this chronic stress response, lowering cortisol levels and protecting the hippocampus, the brain's memory center, from atrophy. Imagine an individual who spends their retirement ruminating on career slights or family disagreements that occurred decades ago. This person interprets their current reality through a lens of bitterness, missing the opportunities for connection available today. Contrast this with the individual who consciously decides that the past is a closed chapter, viewing memories as lessons rather than sentences. This person approaches each day with a lighter mental load, able to engage fully in conversations and retain the details of new experiences because their mind is not crowded with ghosts. The act of forgiveness, whether of others or oneself, is a pragmatic strategy for cognitive clarity. A significant limitation to this practice is the difficulty of distinguishing between letting go and spiritual bypassing, pretending that pain does not exist. True release involves acknowledging the emotion, understanding its origin, and then deciding not to carry it forward. It is not an instant erasure, but a gradual process of detaching the emotional charge from the memory. Deep-seated trauma often requires professional guidance to navigate, and the expectation that one should be able to simply drop severe psychological burdens can be harmful. The goal is progress in unburdening, not immediate perfection. The perspective of Heng suggests that the I or the ego is often the source of this heaviness, as it is the ego that feels offended, diminished, or wronged. By loosening the attachment to a rigid self-image, the individual becomes less susceptible to the emotional turbulence that clouds judgment. When one is less defensive, the mind becomes more open and flexible, traits that are associated with youthful cognition. This flexibility allows for better adaptation to the inevitable changes that come with aging. Furthermore, the habit of complaining is a form of mental rehearsal that reinforces negative neural pathways. Every time a complaint is voiced, the brain strengthens the synaptic connections associated with dissatisfaction and helplessness. Breaking the habit of complaint and replacing it with neutral observation or gratitude rewires the brain to scan for solutions and positives. This is not about toxic positivity, but about efficiency. Complaining wastes energy that could be used for problem-solving or creativity. The emotional climate of the mind determines the weather of the memory. A storm of anger makes it impossible to see clearly, while a sky of acceptance allows for a broad horizon. The practice of emotional regulation is thus a practice of memory preservation. By clearing the emotional backlog, the individual ensures that their cognitive resources are available for the here and now. The senior years can be a time of unparalleled emotional freedom if the work of releasing the heavy luggage of the past is undertaken with sincerity. What old burden am I defending that keeps my mind tired? The cycle of sustainable wisdom and integration, the culmination of these practices, lies not in the achievement of a final, static state of perfection, but in the sustainable integration of discipline into daily life. The conclusion of the journey toward a calmer, clearer brain is the realization that consistency outweighs intensity. Heng Yi's philosophy underscores that the path of self-mastery is circular. One must constantly return to the basics of stillness, movement, and emotional release. The aging brain requires a routine that is rhythmic and predictable, providing a scaffold upon which high-level cognitive function can rest. This consistency creates a sense of safety for the nervous system, allowing it to operate in a state of growth rather than defense. Synthesizing the elements of the previous topics, it becomes evident that the clear mind, the active body, and the unburdened heart are interdependent gears in the same machine. One cannot neglect the body and expect the mind to remain sharp, nor can one ignore emotional health and expect the memory to function perfectly. The future hook of a vibrant, energized elderhood is realized only when these components work in harmony. The promise of the introduction, that aging can be a time of clarity, is fulfilled not by a magic pill, but by the compounding interest of small, daily choices. It is the decision to take a walk instead of sit, to breathe instead of react, and to forgive instead of fester. A crucial aspect of this integration is the acceptance of natural cycles. There will be days of high energy and days of lower energy. The wisdom of age lies in listening to these fluctuations without judgment. Fighting against the reality of the present moment creates friction, and friction creates exhaustion. By aligning with the natural rhythm of the body and mind, the individual conserves energy and avoids the burnout that leads to rapid decline. This acceptance is not resignation. It is a strategic alignment with reality that allows for the most efficient use of resources. The sustainable practice also involves the cultivation of curiosity. A brain that stops learning is a brain that begins to die. The integration of new skills, whether learning a language, a musical instrument, or a system of philosophy, signals the brain to keep its machinery updated. This is the ultimate defiance against the common enemy of inevitable decline. The neuroplasticity of the brain remains active until the very end of life, provided it is given the stimulus to change. The senior years offer the luxury of time to pursue deep learning that was perhaps unavailable during the career-building phase of life. Ultimately, the perspective offered by Heng invites the individual to view themselves not as a fading echo of their younger self, but as a masterpiece in progress. The mental keys discussed are tools for polishing the mirror of the mind so that it reflects the world with increasing brightness. The fear of forgetting is replaced by the confidence of knowing how to care for the instrument of memory. The narrative of decline is rewritten into a story of refinement, where the superfluous is stripped away to reveal the essential. The final empowering thought is that clarity is always available in the present moment. It is never too late to begin the practice of clearing the mind or moving the body. The capacity for change exists as long as there is breath. By committing to these principles, the later years become a testament to the power of the human spirit to evolve, adapt, and shine with a light that is steady and enduring. How will I use my clarity to serve the world today?